Pompeii's doomed lovers, the erotic secrets buried by Vesuvius in 79 AD. Did you know that the most intimate secrets of ancient Rome were not found in a library or a scroll, but under 6 meters of volcanic ash? When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, it did more than destroy cities. It froze a moment of human passion, pleasure, and fear forever in time. Let's float back to that summer on the Bay of Naples, where the city of Pompeii stood bright and alive, unaware that its final sunrise was about to come. Pompeii was no backwater town. It was a thriving Roman resort, home to about 12,000 people, basking under the Mediterranean sun. The streets were paved with volcanic stones, lined with bakeries, taverns, bathhouses, and bustling markets. Murals painted the walls of villas in colors that still seem fresh 2,000 years later: deep reds, sea blues, and golden ochres. But among all the city's wonders, none were more curious than its art. Pompeii was, in truth, a city of desire. The walls of the Lupanar, the city's most famous brothel, tell stories more daring than any poet would recite aloud. Inside its 35 small rooms, frescoes illustrated scenes of passion in stunning detail, not as scandal, but as art and instruction. Visitors could choose a lover and a fantasy from these paintings, much like a menu. The brothel's stone beds and faint traces of carved names still whisper the lives of women who worked there, most of them slaves brought from Greece or the East. To the Romans, sex was not hidden or shameful. It was part of daily life, etched into walls and laughter. Just a few steps away, another kind of love flourished, the quieter, more human kind. Graffiti scratched into the walls near the bakeries and wine bars spoke of longing and pride. "Successus loves Iris, who does not care for him," one reads. Others wrote promises, insults, or simple jokes. Pompeii's people lived fully, and they left behind their words as if they would last forever. No one imagined that eternity would come so soon. Now we move to the morning of August 24th, 79 AD. Pliny the Younger, then just 17, was staying across the bay in Misenum with his uncle, Pliny the Elder, commander of the Roman fleet. Around midday, they saw a cloud rising above Vesuvius, tall, branching, and shaped like a pine tree. Pliny later wrote that it rose to a great height on a kind of trunk and then split off into branches. It was not smoke but a tower of ash and pumice reaching into the stratosphere. At first, many thought it beautiful. But by evening, the beauty had turned to terror. As ash began to fall, Pompeii darkened like twilight. People wrapped cloths over their faces and lit torches to find their way. Roofs started to collapse under the weight of pumice stones. The air filled with choking dust. Some fled toward the sea. Others stayed inside, believing it safer. They did not know that the real danger was yet to come. Meanwhile, in Herculaneum, just a few miles west, the sea began to boil. The first pyroclastic surge, a hurricane of ash, gas, and molten rock, roared down Vesuvius' slope at over 100 kilometers per hour. It buried Herculaneum so fast that the people in its boathouses died before they could scream, their bodies preserved in poses of flight. When the same fate reached Pompeii hours later, the city was already knee-deep in ash. Let's float back into the heart of Pompeii as night falls. The air is unbreathable now. Families huddle together in courtyards, clutching each other in silence. The heat grows unbearable, and yet the rain of ash does not stop. Somewhere near the amphitheater, a gladiator, once cheered by the crowd, now fights for breath in the dark. In another home, a merchant gathers his coins, thinking he might still escape. But when dawn comes, the sky collapses again. The final pyroclastic wave engulfs Pompeii in moments. Every breath stops. Every heartbeat freezes. By the morning of August 25th, the cities of Pompeii, Herculaneum, and Stabia had vanished beneath a gray sea of death. Thousands were gone. The empire mourned, but life in Rome continued. Emperor Titus sent rescue ships, but there was no one left to save. The disaster was recorded in Pliny's letters, the only surviving eyewitness account of the eruption. The rest of the story lay hidden, sealed under ash, waiting for time to remember it. Centuries passed. Fields grew over the buried ruins. Farmers plowed the land, unaware that beneath their feet lay marble courtyards, wine jars, and the plaster shapes of the dead. It was not until 1748, during the reign of Charles III of Spain, that excavators struck something solid, a painted wall, perfectly preserved. The discovery stunned Europe. The lost city of Pompeii had returned, frozen in its final moment. When the first walls of Pompeii were uncovered in the 18th century, the world stood still. Imagine the astonishment of those early explorers, touching mosaics that still shone with color, walking streets where chariot wheels had carved grooves into the stone, and entering homes that felt as if their owners had just stepped out for the day. But what captured the world's imagination most were not the temples or the villas. It was the people. Archaeologists soon discovered hollow spaces in the hardened ash, empty shapes where human bodies once lay. The idea came from Giuseppe Fiorelli in 1863. He realized that these voids could be filled with plaster to recreate the exact forms of the victims in their final moments. When the first cast was made, the room fell silent. Before them appeared a man, crouched in agony, his hands raised to his face. The plaster captured every detail, his expression, the folds of his tunic, even the texture of the sandals he wore. It was as if time itself had taken a photograph of death. Let us float over to one of the most haunting places in Pompeii, the asterisk Garden of the Fugitives asterisk. Here, 13 people were found together, their bodies huddled as they tried to escape the final surge of ash. Among them were children and women clutching each other, faces frozen in fear. Their forms cast in plaster tell the human side of the catastrophe, not just the scale of destruction, but the tenderness of those final embraces. Nearby, archaeologists unearthed two figures lying side by side. At first, they were thought to be a man and a woman. Later DNA studies revealed they were two young men, found face to face, their hands intertwined. Their story, whatever it was, remains unknown. But their presence gave the world a glimpse into Pompeii's hidden emotional lives, untouched by modern judgment. Now we move to the heart of Pompeii's forbidden beauty, the House of the Veti. Once owned by two freedmen, Aulus Vettius Conviva and Aulus Vettius Restitutus, this grand villa was filled with art that celebrated both wealth and pleasure. Its frescoes depict gods, myths, and desire, from Priapus weighing his exaggerated manhood on a scale to scenes of Dionysian feasts that filled the walls with color and laughter. These paintings were not hidden in back rooms but proudly displayed for guests. To the Romans, erotic art was not scandalous. It was symbolic, tied to fertility, fortune, and the cycles of life. In another part of the city stood the Lupanar, the famed brothel whose very name means den of she-wolves. Here, stone beds and walls painted with intimate scenes formed a map of Roman passion. Inscriptions scratched into the plaster record the voices of real people. "Felix was here. He had a good time," reads one. Another simply says, "I don't want to leave." These small words, carved in haste nearly 2,000 years ago, now speak louder than any poem. But Pompeii was not just a city of pleasure. It was a city of work. Archaeologists found more than 30 bakeries, each with mills still standing, some with loaves of bread carbonized in ovens, perfectly preserved. In taverns, amphorae of wine and olives still lay where they fell. One bar even had a painted menu of drinks on the wall. There were public baths where citizens met to gossip and relax, and a massive amphitheater that once echoed with cheers for gladiators. Among those gladiators were men whose remains were found in a special barracks near the city's edge. Several wore heavy shackles, slaves forced to fight for entertainment. One skeleton still wore a bronze helmet. Another was found with a woman, perhaps a lover or admirer, who had chosen to stay with him. Their embrace, preserved under ash, became one of Pompeii's most intimate discoveries, a story of love that refused to flee. Meanwhile, in nearby Herculaneum, excavations revealed a different story. Because the city was buried deeper, its preservation was almost miraculous. Two-story houses stood intact, wooden beams survived, even scrolls in the Villa of the Papyri, the only surviving library from the ancient world. Though the scrolls were charred into brittle cylinders, modern technology has begun to read them, revealing lost works of Epicurean philosophy. Herculaneum, in its silence, preserved the voice of thought while Pompeii preserved the face of life. Let's drift back to the Roman Empire's reaction. When news of the disaster reached Rome, Emperor Titus wept. Historical records describe his deep sorrow for the victims. He ordered relief efforts and visited the area himself, but the land was still uninhabitable. The cities were left as they were, silent tombs. The memory of Pompeii slowly faded, and by the Middle Ages, no one even knew where it lay. farmers plowed vineyards over its ruins, calling the area La Civita the ancient city. For over 16 centuries, Pompeii slept beneath its shroud of ash. When explorers finally began to dig, they uncovered not just art and architecture, but the most personal details of daily life. A woman's bracelet inscribed "From the Heart of Love," a dog still chained at the door of its master's home, and a fresco of Venus rising from the sea, smiling as if time could never touch her. Pompeii's rediscovery changed the world. It sparked the birth of modern archaeology and inspired generations of artists and writers, from Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, who called it a city reborn from the grave, to painters who filled European galleries with visions of its final day. The erotic frescoes shocked the prudish Victorians, so much so that many were locked away in Naples' secret cabinet accessible only to men of mature years and sound morals. But over time, they became understood not as indecency, but as expressions of a civilization that saw beauty and life as inseparable. Now we move to the 20th century, when the excavations grew faster, revealing entire districts. Streets emerged where ruts from ancient carts were still visible. The city map came to life once more. The Forum, the temples, the theaters. But the more that was uncovered, the more fragile Pompeii became. Rain, wind, and modern tourism began to erode what the volcano had once protected. The very act of uncovering Pompeii threatened to destroy it again. Let's float now into the modern era, a time when Pompeii, once forgotten, has become one of the most visited archaeological sites on Earth. Each year, millions of people walk its stone streets, tracing the same paths that Romans once took toward the baths, the markets, and the temples of Jupiter and Apollo. The city feels alive again, though every step echoes with the memory of those who never left. Excavations continued throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, each layer revealing new secrets. In 2018, archaeologists made one of the most extraordinary discoveries in decades: the remains of a man who had survived the initial eruption, only to be struck down by a massive stone block while trying to flee. His skeleton lay across the ancient road, his body half-turned, as though he had just looked back at the mountain. Beside him were fragments of his bag, coins, and tools, the final possessions of a doomed survivor. In another corner of the site, a newly uncovered fresco stunned the world. It depicted a sensual myth, Leda and the Swan. Painted with astonishing delicacy, its colors still vibrant after 2 millennia. The image once decorated a wealthy merchant's home, and its preservation showed just how advanced Roman art had become before the city fell silent. Even now, restorers handle such discoveries with extreme care, cleaning pigments under microscopes to avoid losing a single trace of color. Meanwhile, beneath the volcanic ash, new technologies are rewriting Pompeii's story. Ground-penetrating radar, laser scans, and digital reconstructions allow researchers to see the buried streets without digging. These tools revealed that much of Pompeii still lies untouched, nearly a third of the city preserved beneath modern soil, a time capsule waiting for future generations. Now we move to one of the most intimate moments in all of Pompeii's rediscovery, the story of the two figures known as the embracing lovers. Found in the 1920s, their plaster casts show two people locked together, one's arm draped over the other. For decades, they were thought to be a man and woman, lovers caught in their last embrace. But modern DNA analysis revealed something unexpected. They were two men, likely young, possibly close companions or relatives. Whatever their bond, their pose captures something deeper than romance. It is the raw, human instinct to hold on to someone when the world ends. Every excavation adds new layers to the city's emotional landscape. In one villa, a child's footprints were found preserved in wet ash, as if he had been running toward safety. In another, a jar of olives still glistened with traces of oil. Scientists studying the food remains discovered carbonized figs, loaves of bread, and even traces of wine that had been sealed mid-fermentation. It was as if an entire civilization had been paused mid-meal. Meanwhile, in Herculaneum, excavations under the boathouses revealed over 300 victims, men, women, and children, who had gathered by the shore, waiting for rescue that never came. Their bones tell a terrible truth. They died instantly from the heat, their bodies preserved with jewelry, tools, and even keys in their hands. Some mothers still clutched their infants. Others faced the sea, hoping to glimpse salvation in the firelit night. Let us float to the Villa of the Mysteries, one of the most breathtaking homes in Pompeii, perched on the city's outskirts. Inside its long hall, frescoes cover the walls in vivid crimson, depicting a secret Dionysian ritual, women being initiated into the mysteries of the god of wine and ecstasy. The faces are so lifelike they seem to breathe. Scholars believe this villa once hosted sacred rites known only to Rome's elite. It is one of the few places in the world where we can stand today and feel as though the ancient Romans might walk through the doorway at any moment. Pompeii is not only an archaeological treasure, it's a human mirror. The city reveals how people lived, loved, and feared. The graffiti carved into its walls still carry the voices of its people. A boastful gladiator, a poet of the streets, a lover leaving a farewell. In the House of the Faun, a grand mosaic depicts Alexander the Great charging into battle, a symbol of Rome's ambition and power. Yet just beyond that mosaic, the plaster bodies remind us how fragile even empires can be. As the years passed, preservation became both an art and a race against time. Rain erodes frescoes. Tourists' footsteps wear down ancient stones. Scientists and conservators work daily to stabilize walls, rehouse artifacts, and reconstruct fresco fragments piece by piece. Italy's archaeological park of Pompeii now stands as one of UNESCO's most protected heritage sites, a global reminder that what is buried can also be reborn. And still, the city surprises us. In 2020, archaeologists unearthed a thermopolium, an ancient Roman snack bar, with its counter still painted in bright scenes of ducks, roosters, and a dog on a leash. Inside the vessels, traces of wine, pork, and fish were found. It was the equivalent of a street vendor's stall, frozen mid-service. The details were so vivid that scientists could identify the recipes Romans were eating on the morning they died. Not far from that site, two more bodies were discovered, a wealthy man and his servant, preserved together in a villa outside the city walls. The patterns of their clothing, even the folds of their cloaks, had survived in the ash. Their faces are turned upward, as if watching the firestorm descend. The scientists who studied them noted that the man's hand still rested gently on the shoulder of his servant, a final gesture of human closeness before the end. 2,000 years have passed since Mount Vesuvius roared to life, yet its shadow still falls across the Bay of Naples. The mountain is quiet now, green with vineyards and dotted with villages. But beneath its slopes lies a story unlike any other. A story not of conquest or glory, but of the everyday lives of ordinary people, preserved by catastrophe. Let's take one last look through the dust of centuries. The lovers, the workers, the gladiators, the mothers and children, they remain here in eternal pause, whispering through stone and ash. Pompeii's tragedy was born of destruction, but what endures is not death, it is memory. And as the sun sets over the ruins, lighting the broken columns in gold, it feels as though the city is breathing again, a reminder that even in the silence of ruin, humanity still speaks. If stories like this move you, if you love uncovering the lost chapters of real history buried beneath time, then don't just watch, be part of the journey. Subscribe to Secret Realms Uncovered, where every story whispers from the ruins, and every echo from the past comes alive again. Hit the bell, and let history speak, one haunting truth at a time.